Hello, and thank you for sticking with me, joining me on my journey. Please subscribe below and invite all your friends to join. I want to get this message out there. Today, I want to talk all about traumatic homecomings. So, on this week, when I arrived at the hospital, it was midweek. Mick was sitting in the chair in the room, and he told me that he'd been discharged. And I was like, are you sure? I was very skeptical. I actually didn't believe him at all. He does get a bit confused about what people tell him. And I tried to sort of reduce his expectations really because, there was no discharge letter sitting around. There was no medication. Nobody had mentioned anything. So I called a nurse and actually she did confirm the doctor said he was fit enough to be discharged, but he hadn't actually been discharged yet. And I know that from previous occasions that even once you're discharged, you generally wait about 5 hours for the medication. Usually end up with a big bag of medication to take home, and that takes a while from when they discharge for the pharmacy to release that. I also knew, because they'd asked me to get there for a certain time that day, that he needed to have a nebulizer. Now, I like to think this is a real Star Trek exploration, but actually it's a way to inhale medication which protects his chest and involves sitting in a cupboard and sucking through a tube for 10 minutes. Really sexy. So I wheeled him down there. I checked him in to have received very hostile service from the receptionist, which is very unusual there. But apparently they had some new rules and I had to leave him there because I couldn't stay. But she didn't look at me. She didn't ask me any questions or anything. She sort of barked her orders at me and pointed at this sign that was on the desk, which had so many words on it that I didn't read it anyway. So, well, there was no way that I was leaving him alone. I mean, goodness knows what might have happened. So I just pushed him around the corner because there's a bit of a bend in the corridor there, which actually was right outside the nebulizer room, but it was out of her sight. So I waited there. The nurse came. She was lovely. She was happy for me to be there because I was supporting Mick anyway. And I did say to her, the receptionist told me I shouldn't be here. She obviously spoke to the receptionist because a bit later on, while I was waiting there, the receptionist came to me and apologised, which I did appreciate, but kind of felt I needed to say something. So I was very polite to her, but I did tell her that I had found her very abrupt and that actually really she should consider her audience when she's giving messages like that because she's dealing with people who are very sick, dying, or caring for people who are sick. And I just felt it was inappropriate. Now I've got a background in customer service, so this is partly my customer service profession kicking in, but actually I just felt it was just dignity, for actually an understanding. So anyway, I left it with her and she did apologise and said that she'd go away and consider what I'd said. So whatever. Um, anyway, so we carried on. Mick actually looks very old at the moment because he's obviously quite weak. He's in a wheelchair. Also, he's got no hair. And it all fell off during the week the last week when of being in the ward. And being bald does make him look so much older. So much so that the nurse thought he might be my dad. So I did put her right and she was fine. That must be a mistake they make a lot of the time. Anyway, the trip to the nebulizer, went without incident, and we returned to the ward where they happily confirmed that he could come home. And actually, they even agreed that I could pop back the next day and pick up the meds so that we didn't have to wait around for hours and hours. So I thought that was really good. And it really good for Mick because for the last 2 days, he was like a child in the back of the car asking if we're there yet. Can I go home yet? When can I go home? Can I go home yet? So they printed off the discharge letter, and we've got a whole collection of those at home now. And we set off homeward. So pie and chips is what we had for dinner. Pucker pies. And because that was the one thing that was bad in hospital, the food was just dreadful. It's no wonder that people lose weight when they go in there. Mick lost about 4 kilos each time, so he's lost about 8 kilos since both times that he went in. I mean, he's got a little bit of weight to lose off his tummy, but nowhere else really. Anyway, we fed him up when I got home. He had pie and chips. He ate every bit of it. And it was really nice to have him home. It is great to have him home because, it's just more relaxed. He's much more comfortable and he will recover better now that he's at home. And I don't have to make that round trip to the hospital and sit there for hours. So, we ate, we dozed in front of the telly together. Then he went to sleep in his own bed. And we have separate rooms and we have had for some years. And I'll go in and explain that another time. But just to say, it works best for both of us. Having said that night and for a few nights, I did leave my door wide open just in case he needs me, and then I can hear if he's struggling or if he's calling for me. But you know, for 2 days, all was well. He slept well. He got up about 9:30 in the morning. He ate 3 meals a day. He did nod off mid-afternoon, but that's to be expected. And then 2 days later, we had to head back to the hospital just for regular blood tests. That was fine. You know, we do that every 4 weeks anyway. This is just to test everything after the stem cell transplant. We got a call with a consultant on the Tuesday, so we tend to go for bloods on the Sunday. We were pulling out of the car park after we'd done the bloods, and he had a bit of a funny turn. He started getting all like restless and anxious, and he was trying to tell me something, but he couldn't get the words out. And he seemed to be trying to undo his seatbelt. I thought he was going to try and get out of the car, which he couldn't have done on his own anyway. And I was like, "What's going on?" I kept saying to him, "Tell me what it is. I don't know what you're trying to tell me." And it's so frustrating because you know that something's wrong, but you just don't know what it is. So we got out of the barrier, and I pulled over to like try and find out what it was wrong, but he just couldn't. There was no words coming out. Whether he just looked frustrated, he almost looked angry at me because I didn't understand what was going on. And then all of a sudden, there was this little look of relief on his face, mixed with embarrassment. Turns out he'd needed a wee, got himself in a bit of a panic, and then wet himself. Fortunately, we've got heated seats, dried him up nicely. But I did, you know, I'd even asked him twice in the hospital, "Do you need to go for a wee before we go?" No, 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 no. But the trouble is his body doesn't always indicate things until it's right at the last moment and it's urgent or even too late sometimes. So, I mean, it would have been a faff to go back into the hospital from where we were. So, and he'd been by then anyway. So actually he was fine. He was mortified, but he was fine. So I drove home as quickly as traffic let me. And I'm not even sure why, because the damage had already been done by then, but it just felt appropriate to try and get home as quickly as possible. And when we got home, I mean, the car seat had dried itself out. I mean, obviously, I cleaned it to stop it from smelling and cleaned it up. We got home, we dried him up. He still wasn't quite right in himself. He was very confused. During the course of the evening, he went to the toilet. He probably weed every 20 minutes. And I said, I thought maybe he had a little urine infection. This is based on past experience, which you'll hear about in another episode. I suggested to him that we actually called the hospital and took him back in, but he refused. "I am not going back into the hospital," he said. "I'll just deal with it." So, I mean, that's fine. But for me, this just brought back actually some quite distressing memories of his last transplant. And as I said, I'll cover that in the next episode because it's a story of all of its own. But for me, it was bad memories, and I was like worried because I'm the one who has to deal with it. It's all very well for him to say that, but you know, I'm the one dealing with the fallout from it. So anyway, I relented and I said, well, if you drink lots of water, because if it's a urine infection, it's about kidneys, and that's the worry really. So he drank lots of water. He had an early night, and I said, we'll see how you are in the morning. I said, but if you are the same in the morning, then I am calling them, because you know he was still losing his words, he was still confused, and he was still weeing a lot. So for me, that was a really sleepless night. I left his bedroom door open. I left my door open wide. I kept listening for him getting up and going to the toilet, which he did often that night. He's got a bathroom right next to his bed, so it's only a few steps away. But if he's not in a good place, then that is difficult to do. He might not make it in time. You know, maybe there's a chance he might fall or slip. And when he's not well, it is difficult. So I didn't go into his room every time, but I just lay there listening. And I did go in a couple of times on the pretense that I was getting up and going for a wee anyway. So that night, I literally just pretty much spent the whole night lying there listening. And then, just then you cross with yourself because you're not sleeping. Fortunately, I can cope without sleep. And oh, you know, we got through it. We got through the night, and actually, happily, the next day he seemed to be back to normal. So we didn't contact the hospital. The rest of the week, he slept a lot. He felt like shit, but nothing out of the ordinary. So that was a big phew. That was a big like relief. So, you know, we just jogged along for a few days. The consultant called on the Tuesday and said that actually his bloods and everything were fine, and they'd review it again in 2 weeks. So we'd deal with it again in 2 weeks. So that was good. But while all this is going on, I'm in the process of selling our Fiat 124 Spider, our little convertible on CarWow. So I'm going through the process of like uploading it, talking to them, getting it out there, agreeing a deal. And actually, I'll be fair, it was a really easy process. I got a good bids from dealers. I, you know, accepted the top bid. I uploaded all the documents. I uploaded all the photos. I arranged a collection date, and then you know we booked that into diary, which was for next week, so following week. So that's one thing off my list, and Mick is in a good place. I mean, he's tired and everything, but he's in a good place at the moment. So all good.